Oh, it's that time again.
Welcome to Kingslayer Hoops. Today we're going to be talking about the Anthony Davis trade, and this is going to be a bit of a follow-up to my previous video where I talked about how that trade could be a disaster for the Lakers. But before we get into it, I am going to ask you guys, if you support good, intelligent NBA discussion, please hit the like button and the subscribe button. Also leave a comment below letting me know what topics you'd like me to talk about in the future. I'd very much appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Okay, so last video, I talked a little bit about how Anthony Davis being traded to the Lakers could be Dwight Howard 2.0. Not in the quality of player that Anthony Davis is, but in the quality of that trade and how AD could theoretically end up leaving next year. Now, it is unlikely that that would happen, but I'd like to follow up on that doomsday scenario today and talk a little bit about whether or not Anthony Davis could return to the Pelicans in the 2020 offseason, so next July. Now today we're going to talk about whether or not that is a real possibility and what the implications would be for both teams involved as well as the league as a whole. So let's take a look first of all as to the historical context of this. I tried to do a little research to see if we've ever seen a player demand a trade and then immediately return back to the team from whence he was traded. And what I eventually found was that nothing like this has ever occurred in the history of the league. Now, some weird situations that I have seen, the Bulls, for example, traded Kirk Hinrich to the Wizards in 2010, and then Kirk Hinrich came back to Chicago in 2012 of his own volition. Now, as much as I enjoyed Kirk Hinrich, and he was a good role player, and I enjoyed those ridiculous goggles, he was not exactly the caliber of Anthony Davis, so this is kind of apples to oranges. And in addition, this was 2 years removed from the initial trade, and we don't know if he demanded a trade either. So, yeah, I mean, we also saw something like this with Zydrunas Ilgauskas. So he was traded to the Wizards, and then he was waived, and then he ended up returning to the Cavs afterwards. So I will say it's kind of weird that the Wizards were involved in both of these situations. But yeah, neither of these are particularly close to this hypothetical situation that we're talking about today, where Anthony Davis could end up leaving the Lakers and going back to the Pelicans next year. So yeah, I'm not going to go into excruciating detail about, every trade and then return that's happened in NBA history, but needless to say, we've never seen anything like this hypothetical Anthony Davis situation. So, moving on from that, our next question is this even allowed? As of right now, would Anthony Davis be able to leave the Lakers and then return directly 1 year later to the team that he was traded from? So the current CBA, or collective bargaining agreement, says the following about a player returning to a team from which he was traded. A team cannot reacquire a player that they traded away during that season, a season being July 1st to July 30th. If he is waived by his new team, then he cannot re-sign with the original team until the 1 year anniversary of the trade or until the July 1st following the end of his contract, whichever comes first. However, if a team trades a player's draft rights, they can reacquire the player during the same season. Okay, so that last part doesn't apply to Anthony Davis, but what we have seen from this initial portion of that excerpt is that yes, Anthony Davis, as of July 1st, 2020, would be able to rejoin the New Orleans Pelicans because his contract would be up. So to answer our second question, yes, it would be possible for Anthony Davis to rejoin the Pelicans in 2020. So yeah, let's take a look now at the implications for both teams involved here. Why don't we start by looking at the Lakers? I talked a little bit about this in my previous video, but if the Lakers were to lose Anthony Davis in the upcoming offseason, it would be absolutely catastrophic for the franchise. First of all, they gutted the entire team for Anthony Davis, and not only did they gut their current roster, they've gutted their future roster as well. The only assets right now that they have, besides AD, are Kyle Kuzma, an aging LeBron, Isaac Bonga, Mo Wagner, and Jamario Jones. That's it, as of the time of me making this video. They've traded away their most valuable draft picks for a better part of the next decade, and there would be absolutely no path to a rebuild anytime in the near future if AD were to leave next offseason. So I think that in this scenario, if he were to leave and go back to the Pelicans in 2020, I think the Buss family would have to sell the team. I mean, I don't think an ownership group would ever have had that kind of egg on their face in the history of the league. I can't think of another example because, as we said, historically this has never happened before. But think about how much you would have to have screwed up as a franchise to have a guy demand to make his way to your team and then see that your franchise is so bad, so awful that he was like, nope, never mind. That situation I was in before, that was actually better. So yeah, I think the Buss family would have to sell the team in this situation, and I think whoever were to buy the Lakers would be able to buy relatively low. I mean, it would still be like billions of dollars because the Lakers is one of the most profitable franchises in all of sports, but still, you'd be able to buy relatively low in that case. Basically, this would be a doomsday scenario for the Lakers, and I think the Clippers would end up becoming LA's team. Like, that's how bad this situation would be, because LA would have absolutely no future for the next, 7 years. Now, from the Pelicans' perspective, if you pair Zion with Anthony Davis, year 2 Zion, after he's got some experience under his belt with still young Anthony Davis, these two would complement each other so well. And if Kevin Durant does in fact end up leaving the Warriors, I actually think that the 2020-2021 Pelicans would be title favorites if AD were to go back there. I think their games would fit together so well. AD would be that mid-range threat, Zion would be that playmaker. And I think from a league-wide perspective, this pairing would signal the end of kind of that Warriors-Rockets 5-out era where teams are only focused on shooting three-pointers and, not taking mid-range shots and not worrying about centers and big men so much. I think the AD and Zion pairing would signal a new era in the NBA where teams now were more obsessed with dynamic big men. Basically power forwards and centers that can pass, that can shoot the mid-range, that can shoot the three, that can do a little bit of everything, kind of like Zion and AD. But yeah, I think that would be a league-wide paradigm shift if AD were to go back to the Pelicans, because I think that would be such a successful pairing. And if we look at their roster, and if we look at who they currently have on their cap 2 years from now, we can project that their lineup would involve some combination of these players, right? So they would have Zion Williamson, obviously. They would have prime AD, who would still be 27 years old at the time, as crazy as that is, beginning of his prime, right? They would have Lonzo Ball, who I believe in very much. They would have the potential to bring back Brandon Ingram, but we'll see what they do with that next offseason. They would probably have to let him go. But they would have Josh Hart, Drew Holiday, who he's getting a little bit up there in age, but I think he would still be a prime defender, good ball handler, good distributor. They would have Jackson Hayes, who they just recently drafted. Now, you could argue that Jackson Hayes would be more of an asset than anything, a tradable asset, because he would probably be coming off the bench at this point. So if he gets really good, then, he might not be happy coming off the bench, and then another team might be interested in him. So regardless of what happens with Jackson Hayes, I think that's a valuable asset to have. Then, of course, they would have all these assets that they acquired in trades recently, right? So they would have the Cleveland protected 2020 first pick. They would have the Los Angeles 2021 or 2022 pick because they had a deferment there. They would have a pick swap in 2023. They would have either the 2024 or the 2025 pick. This is crazy. They would have so many assets. It would put that Danny Ainge package to shame that he thought he had the last couple of years. And man, I would be crying personally because I'm a Lakers fan, but I can't think of a franchise that would be in better position than the Pelicans. So now we have to ask ourselves, is any of this actually going to happen? Is it likely to happen? The answer to that is no. First of all, I think that if this were to happen, it would basically be political suicide for Clutch and for Anthony Davis himself. I don't think anyone would ever want to work with Clutch again because of the optics of this. I don't think LeBron would be very happy. I think that if anything, Clutch would have to let AD go, or AD would have to let Clutch go. And I think another possible ramification of this would be that the league would probably have to do an investigation of some sort of collusion, right? They'd have to bring friggin' Robert Mueller in to figure out if this was all the plan from the beginning for AD. Like maybe AD went to the ownership group, he went to Gail Benson and said, hey, listen, trade me to the Lakers for a year, rob them blind, get everything that you can get, and I'll come back next year, and then you'll have all these assets, and we'll be way better than we've ever been before. So yeah, like I said, the optics on this would be absolutely terrible. Again, is this likely to happen? No, but like many of these videos, it's just a thought experiment. If it happens 1 year from now, I am gonna claim it as me calling it, even though I'm not calling it. But I reserve the right to claim it if it happens. But yeah, guys, that's gonna do it for this video. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think it's possible that AD goes back to the Pelicans next offseason? Let me know in the comments section. Again, as always, let me know what topics you want me to cover in the future. And until next time, happy gaming, y'all.